Welcome to episode 263 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm talking about what to do in those situations where you just can't let go of some offense in the past and you need to figure out a way to move forward. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. I first started the Truth for Teachers podcast in 2015, and now nearly 300 episodes later, I'm proud to say there is a wealth of helpful information available to you. But you don't have time to listen to 300 episodes. How do you know you didn't miss out on something great a while back? What if there's something you need to hear now that I haven't talked about in a while? Enter the new Truth for Teachers playlists. I've carefully curated the episodes I'm most proud of and that I think will help you the most from our 7 years of podcasting. Choose from the Greatest Hits playlist, the Encouragement playlist, the Productivity playlist, and the Student Engagement playlist. Go to truthforteachers.com/playlists and enter your email address to receive the playlist that you want. I'll send you a PDF with a description of each episode, a link to its blog post, and a link to the MP3 file for listening. The PDF also shares some special bonuses and other related resources I think you might like. I hope this helps you find the best of our Truth for Teachers podcast. Just go to truthforteachers.com/playlists to get the free playlist of your choice. So in this episode, we are talking about those situations in life and in teaching that you just can't get over and you want desperately to reframe. Maybe it's a negative interaction with a colleague or a parent that you can't let go of, or an unhelpful impression about a student that you can't shake, or a hurtful incident with a partner or a colleague or even a student that you just never moved past. In our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook, I asked listeners to anonymously submit the situation like this that has been bugging them. So they submitted via a Google form, and then I chose several that I'm going to respond to here on the podcast. Keep in mind, this episode is about mental reframing. So my advice is going to center on how to change your thinking about the problem so that it no longer feels like you're carrying this heavy weight. Here's the first one. A parent yells at you on the phone and says you're calling their child a liar. I think all of us have been in those kinds of situations with parents before, right? Where we feel like we're just completely misunderstood and accused of something that's totally not true. So again, we're focusing on the thought work here, not on what to say or do with a parent or how to prevent these types of situations in the future. Obviously, those elements are also important, but I think advice about how to communicate with parents is pretty abundant on the internet, and that is the simpler problem to resolve. Not replaying the incident over and over in your mind, not feeling some kind of way now about their child, not holding on to bitterness and a constant low-grade anxiety about that parent, well, that's much more difficult. We're dealing with a confrontation now that is in the past. It's already happened. The teacher has already dealt with it however they did, and it's over. But in the teacher's mind, it's still going on. Each time we replay stressful situations, we are recreating the stressful emotions in our body. If you tell someone the story about a negative interaction that you had with a parent, chances are good that as you're telling it, your blood pressure is going to rise. You're going to start getting heated just recalling it. From a thought work perspective, this is creating unnecessary stress. All thoughts are optional. A thought can come into your head about how this parent called you a liar, and you can choose not to engage with that thought. You can choose to just let that thought pass right on by. You can also counter that thought with another thought, or distract yourself by thinking and doing something that's more pleasant. It is your choice whether to keep thinking about this accusation from the parent or not. And again, we're only talking about how to let go of the anxiety here. We're not saying it was okay for the parent to do it. We're not saying that you don't need to also handle it. We're just talking about the thought work piece here. For me, it's helpful to think of a good reframing for the situation that I can repeat to myself anytime unwanted thoughts come up. So in this case, if I'm watching TV or I'm doing dishes and I suddenly start thinking about this argument with a parent, I might tell myself something like this. That situation is over. I handled it the best way I could in the moment. Since then, I've thought carefully about ways to rebuild the relationship with that parent, and I've done what I could to prevent more problems from occurring. It is not helpful or productive for me to be thinking about this parent right now when I'm supposed to be relaxing and I need to unwind from my workday. I choose not to mentally replay conflicts from the past. It is over, and there's no conflict in this moment. Everything in this moment is fine. So I choose to stay present here now in this moment. The next teacher question that was submitted was this. I have a couple of kids whose emotions are volatile. I find myself anxious whenever I know their class is coming. Sometimes they are completely fine, but other days they are totally disruptive. I think what's happening here is anticipating problems. So when you know that you have a class where, sometimes there's some kids in there who can be triggered by something and go off and you don't really know what to expect, your brain will try to predict that. Your brain is always trying to predict all the things that could ever possibly go wrong in order to keep you safe. That's how our brains are designed to work. We focus on the negative and the things that could be dangerous or harmful to us because that's self-protective. Evolutionarily speaking, focusing on the positive and believing the best about people is not an optimal strategy from a survival standpoint. So to me, this is about moving out of that primal lizard brain and activating a wiser part of yourself that realizes you're not actually in danger and you don't need to be focusing on the potential harm. And that can be as simple as thinking about this with a more conscious reframing and realizing you are anticipating problems. There's not an actual problem in this moment. You're anticipating that something could go wrong. You're not in actual danger. Your brain is just projecting things into the future, things that could possibly go wrong. And that is a great function for your brain to have. If your potential threat is a saber-toothed tiger, that's great. When it's a class of students who may act out, well, that's a counterproductive reaction, right? But your body can't tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. And that's unfortunate because you will be better prepared to handle any kind of emotional volatility from your students if you're not already on edge. When you don't consciously counteract this natural instinct, when you're just anticipating problems with people, then the moment that a child even breathes wrong, if they even look at you wrong, you will immediately go into a fight or flight mode. And that will cause you to have an escalated response to the situation and possibly overreact. So you want to start off class each day in a more calm, neutral emotional state so that you can respond to kids in ways that are healthy and commiserate with what they're actually giving you. This will allow you to act rather than react. It's convincing your brain you are not in danger so that you don't immediately go into this defensive reactive mode. So the reframing here could be, each day is a fresh start. Whatever happened in the past is not necessarily what's going to happen today. Whatever happens today, I trust that I am capable of handling it. I have handled everything else in the past. I know I can do this. I will know what I'm supposed to do when the time comes. I trust myself to make good choices in the moment. I can stay calm and neutral and respond to kids from the wisest part of myself. So this situation could be just as simple as practicing that reframing every single day until it becomes your new mental habit. But if that does not work, and it may not, it could be that you have witnessed really extreme behaviors in the classroom, and you may have a form of PTSD. If you don't know much about post-traumatic stress syndrome or stress disorder, you may assume that it's something that only happens to soldiers after they come home from war. But PTSD can occur after any situation that any person finds traumatic, and it often happens without them consciously regarding it as traumatic. In their minds, they think they've processed it and handled it and moved on. Their body's saying something different. Your central nervous system may be triggered, and you may have a heightened response in your body regardless of what your mind is thinking. When trauma is stored in the body, you're going to have a physiological reaction in triggering situations. It's a body memory, not just a memory in the mind. So you will need to heal that trauma, which a lot of folks, myself included, believe is stored in your body on a cellular level. And that's something that you can work through with lots of different tools: counseling, psychotherapy, meditation, breath work, energy healing. There's a whole host of options in addition to doing thought work. So if you are carrying your students' trauma, or you are carrying the weight of witnessing the effects of their trauma, do seek out tools specifically designed to help with that. The next teacher says this: I am so overwhelmed with class size, students with IEPs that need so much extra support but get very little, and so on, that I end up snapping at various students during the day. Often they're sweet kids who just want my attention, want me to look at what they made, and so on, but I snap at them. And then I feel sorry, ashamed, guilty, and I beat myself up for the rest of the day. These situations can seem really minor, but have a huge impact on how we feel. And getting in touch with those feelings is super important so that we don't find ourselves caught in a shame spiral. You're never going to be the teacher your kids need when you're mentally beating yourself up and thinking about what a terrible person you are. That is just not helpful in any way. I find it useful in those situations to try to get out of my head a little bit and drop into the body and notice what impact the situation is having on me. So notice the reaction that you're having in your body, because as I shared, sometimes we mentally deal with situations and we think we've moved on, but the pain is still being stored in the body and it needs to be healed. When I am rude to students, or to anyone for that matter, or when I'm impatient, when I'm snappy, when I don't treat people around me the way that I want to treat them, and I don't make things right with them, I will often feel tension in my body. However, I've had to practice noticing this and not just staying stuck in this whirlwind of thoughts about the situation. So I have to sort of let go of those thoughts a little bit and do a quick check-in. How am I feeling physically right now? Sometimes I will notice a lump in my throat or a pit in my stomach. Sometimes I'll have tension in my upper back or my lower back. Sometimes it's around my shoulder area because I'm sort of hunched up. Those physiological symptoms are all evidence that this is not just about mentally replaying past conflicts or mentally replaying the things that you did in the past. So in that case, you can't just dismiss unhelpful thoughts and mentally move on. When you start feeling the stress in your body, it's going to take a little bit more to deal with it. So when that happens, there's two ways that I find I can clear the tension in my body so I can really move on. These two approaches go hand in hand. One is breathing through it. So doing really deep inhales and deep exhales to get that tension out. Breath is life. Breath is energy. You don't want unresolved pain trapped inside of you. And breathing is a powerful way to release it on an energetic level. So when you exhale, envision all of the bottled up emotions and shame and guilt leaving your body. Don't allow it to stay stuck in there, because that's what leads to more pain and other physical symptoms. The other approach that goes along with this is to repair the harm that I've done. So sometimes I need to breathe through it first and kind of get myself together before talking to the person. And sometimes the first thing I need to do is go apologize and own what I did, and then breathe out that tension and let the whole thing go. When you stop thinking all those negative thoughts and just drop down into your body, you'll know which one of those steps to take first. At some point after you snap at your kids, acknowledge it. Tell them, I'm sorry I lost my temper with you this morning. I didn't like the way I spoke to you. It didn't feel good. And I want you to know that I want to always speak to you with kindness and respect. Sometimes I don't do that and I mess up because I'm human. But I want to tell you, I'm sorry I was mean. And I want to know if you will give me a fresh start so that we can have a better afternoon together. This kind of simple, honest, direct talk can be used with little ones, with teens, with adults alike. And the really nice thing about owning your stuff with your students is that you will feel so much more empowered to let them know how you're feeling when you're frustrated. We snap at our kids because we're out of self-control and our willpower has been depleted. But the next time you feel like snapping and you remember how it's going to create tension in your back and a pit in your stomach and you're going to have to apologize afterward, it's going to make you think twice. And you'll be able to say to the kids in the moment, I'm getting really frustrated that so many people are not following directions right now. I'm working very hard to speak to you in a kind and respectful tone. I need you to show that same respect back to me and listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you for the directions for this next activity. The awesome thing about that approach is that it's also training kids to understand how their behavior makes other people feel. Children are naturally self-absorbed until we train them explicitly in how to be considerate of others and how to be mindful of the way that their choices impact people around them. So this approach really opens the door for healthy communication and causes you to think twice about saying and doing things you'd be embarrassed about, and it gives kids a model for what they can do when they're frustrated and they're about to go off on someone. But from a thought work perspective, which is our focus for this episode, don't bottle in the shame and the guilt. Breathe through it and get it out of your body and repair the harm that you've done so that you can move on. Shame comes from feeling like you did something terribly wrong and you would be embarrassed if anyone ever found out. So you need to hide it. You need to pretend that it didn't happen. But when you admit to your students that you mistreated them and you tell them you're sorry, it helps clear the shame and prevent the problem from happening again. The next situation is from a teacher who says, "The state in which I live and teach had a teacher strike 2 years in a row. It was a very emotional journey. Support from family, friends, and the community was mixed. I still feel like my profession is under attack, and it has caused a lot of anxiety." So this is a deep problem, and I'm going to give you a deep solution. One approach here is to question the thought that the profession is under attack. Byron Katie has a process that she calls the work, and it allows us to create distance between ourselves and the thoughts that are causing us stress. She teaches that our thoughts about a situation create suffering, and by questioning our thoughts, we can relieve that suffering. As much evidence as there is that the profession is indeed under attack, and that's a thought that I have believed myself many, many times. From a thought work perspective, we have to remember that all thoughts are optional. You can choose the thoughts you want to think. If a thought is not helpful for you, you do not have to dwell on it. And one way to avoid dwelling on it is by questioning it. We often get very attached to our thoughts. We get attached to the point of even identifying with them and believing they are part of us. They are our identity. But you are not your thoughts. When you question your thoughts, that allows you to distinguish between yourself, who you actually are, and the thoughts that are currently running through your brain. Then you can examine them with curiosity and not feel so deeply attached to beliefs that are creating pain and suffering. So there are 4 questions that Byron Katie advocates for as part of the work. The first question to ask yourself is that really true? And the answer is either yes or no. Can't be a yes but, or a yes and, or yes, well sometimes, just yes or no. And if it's a yes, then you ask yourself, can I really know that it's true? The point of asking those questions is only to allow you to examine your thoughts. That's it. There's no correct answer. And it really doesn't matter what the answer is, like whether the thought is true or not. The work is in the questioning. So if you can sincerely ask yourself, is it really true that our profession is under attack? You're already on the path to relieving that anxiety because you're no longer automatically believing your own thoughts and assuming that all the thoughts that come into your head are true and accurate. That's a headspace that most folks never get to. So you are doing great if you're willing to even entertain the question of whether or not your thought is true. Questioning if it's true leaves space to consider other opinions, other thoughts, other beliefs, other facts. Is it really true that the profession is under attack? Is that an actual fact, like completely undebatable? Is there any evidence that the profession is not under attack? Because if there's any shred of doubt there, if there's any possibility that someone else could hold a different belief than yours, then you've now disassociated yourself from the thought that the profession is under attack. And now the thought has less power over you. Byron Katie then asks you to look for ways to turn that thought around. So instead of the profession is under attack, which you've just examined and you've tried to find evidence for that, what if you turned it around and looked for evidence of another perspective? The profession is not under attack. Is there any evidence at all for that thought to be true? Another turnaround. I am attacking the profession. Could that be true in any capacity? Can you find any evidence for that thought? How about this one? My profession should be under attack. That could be another turnaround. Can you find any evidence for that thought? So you keep looking at the thought from lots of different angles. You're feeling like the profession's under attack, the community was only sort of supporting you, people didn't really have your back. How else might you think about the situation? What else might be true that you haven't considered yet? Could the situation be more complex and nuanced and have more gray areas than what you initially assumed, which is that your thought is correct and that's the immutable truth? The profession's just under attack, end of story. The third question to ask yourself when doing the work from Byron Katie is, how do I react when I believe that thought? And I'll answer that here for myself. When I believe the thought that the profession is under attack, people aren't supporting teachers, I feel helpless. I feel frustrated. I'm unhappy. I am discouraged. I am demotivated. So by answering that question, that gives me insight into the way that my choice to believe that thought is creating suffering and pain in myself. The fourth and final question is, who or what would you be without that thought? When I'm not believing the thought that our profession is under attack, I feel less overwhelmed by all of the problems in education. Without that thought, I feel empowered to do something about the problems. Without that thought, I am a person who feels hopeful about the future. Now, the work is a profound mindset change for all of us when we first hear it. It took me a long time to get it, and it's something I still work on. You might have some confusion right now. You might have some resistance to it. However, it is a useful tool for all kinds of questions, and many of them are questions that were submitted to me for this episode. There was one about a principal who devalued the teacher's work and creates all kind of self-doubt in them. There was one about a colleague who said some really hurtful things that destroyed the trust and the camaraderie. If you have any kind of situation like this that you are not over and you just can't let go of, try doing the work here. Ask yourself, is that thought really true? That this relationship is irreparable, or I've been betrayed, or I can't move on from this. Is that really true? Can you really know it to be true? Think of ways you can turn those thoughts around and examine the evidence for different points of view. And then ask, how do I react when I believe that thought? And who am I without that thought? If you go to thework.com, you can find Byron Katie's resources, which are all completely free, by the way, including something that she calls the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, which has these 4 questions and some other follow-up questions and stuff on them too. So you can fill that out anytime you want to question your thought. Anytime you're having a thought that is not serving you well and it's creating anxiety, you can use that process to question it. Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is the running theme amongst all the advice that I've shared here today. Your thoughts are optional. You can choose which thoughts you think and which thoughts you believe. Just because a thought is in your head does not mean it's true. Even if a thought is true, if it's not serving you well, if you don't like who you are with that thought, you have the option to choose a different thought. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.